You guys hear me? Am I on? Picking me up? Is my mic on? Not really? What about now? Nothing? There we go. There we go. There goes the magic. They make all the magic happen back there, you know. Good morning. Happy Sabbath. It's good to see everybody. Hope everybody had a good week and that we are feeling good. My brother Keith inspired me last time he spoke. He brought the Bible up here, and I was like, maybe I rely on the technology a little too much. Maybe I need to kick it old school. Bring the word up here with me. So bear with me if I get a little nervous, frantically, flipping around here. Happy Sabbath. Happy Sabbath. So the last time I spoke, I had mentioned that I thought that I was going to get into a series on the prison epistles. It's an area that I've been studying over the last couple of weeks, and I still think that there are some lessons to be gleaned in those books. But this week, really over the last couple of weeks, there is a phrase that has been on my mind and on my heart. I found myself repeating it to myself. I found myself thinking about it a lot. And even just now, a couple of minutes ago during the worship service, I stepped outside and I prayed for a moment, and I found myself coming back to the same phrase that I'm really going to speak on today. And what I kept saying as I prayed was, I trust you, God. I trust you, God. I trust you, God. This is something that has really resonated heavily, as I mentioned, probably more so over the entire year than really the last few weeks. But as I continued to think and continued to pray, it just kept coming to me. Do you trust me? Yes, I trust you, God. Do you trust me? I trust you, God. I trust you, Father. Guide me, Father. I trust you in all things. So let's jump into it. Turn with me, if you can, to the book of Proverbs. We're going to turn to the book of Proverbs. We're going to start in chapter 3, and we're going to go to verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Now, this is a verse that I've heard many times before, but if I'm being completely honest, it wasn't until fairly recently that it really started to resonate with me and have some deep meaning, for lack of better terms. Again, this is something I've continually come back to, trusting in the Lord with all my heart. And I think it's something that we can say, and maybe something that in certain times can really resonate with us. But at least for me personally, there are other times where I don't necessarily focus on it, meditate on it, pray about it, really think and meditate on it. But again, over the last few weeks, I've found myself doing that. It's a big part of helping me stay balanced and keep myself regulated. Through the chaos of the pandemic, through family trials, through relationship trials, through sickness, through self-doubt, through all kinds of things, I find myself, again, asking myself, well, do you trust the Lord with all your heart? And telling the Lord as I pray, Lord, I trust you. Father, I trust you, because I do. And it's something that I want to walk in every day. Do I trust God? Yes, I trust God. Yes, I trust you, God. Then walk in that. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your understanding. If you talk to people in my life, a lot of them will tell you that I encourage them to seek additional perspectives. I usually say something along the lines of, hey, there's more angles here. You're looking at it from the wrong angle. There's more angles. I like to consider myself someone who encourages people to expand upon their insights. You see, if I see things only from where I stand, only from my worldview, only from my experiences, there's so much that I miss out on. There's so much that I don't understand. There's so much that goes right over my head. So even when I talk to people, even when somebody says, hey, Tim, can you talk about something? And they start telling me a story, they start running me through a scenario, I'm the guy that goes, okay, wait a minute, but what happened just before that? What was their mindset? Were they upset? Were they frustrated? What was going on? And people are like, why do you ask all these questions? Because the details matter. Context matters. I want insight. I want to understand as much as I can before we jump into this. So I encourage people often to expand upon their insights. I like to say stuff like, have you considered this? Is this something that you've thought about? And it's on the hope of hopefully expanding their insights, expanding their horizons, opening their eyes to other angles, other perspectives, other variables that will dictate in some situations how and why people will act in the ways that they act. Is there another perspective? Have we empathized with the other party? Do we try and put ourselves in their shoes to understand where they're coming from? Where are we looking at this from? Do we look at it from where we stand in our two shoes? Do we look at it from a higher angle? I like to tell people that, we see things three-dimensionally, right? We see things in 3D. You play video games, it might be 2D, and then it goes to 3D, and everything's just fantastic. What dimensions do you think God sees the world in? What dimensions do you think God sees us in? What kind of perspective does he have? It says he knows what's to come. It says that he knows already what his plans are for us before we're born. Why do we experience the things that we experience? Why do we go through the things that we go through? Do we see things in a 2D or 3D perspective as we try and figure it out? Or do we rely on God the Father who sees things at a much, much different perspective with many, many more angles and details and understandings than we could ever imagine or ponder? What does this look like for God? How does God help us expand upon our insights? How does God teach us things that in the moment, maybe we don't care to learn, but maybe 5, 6, 7, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, we'll look back upon that lesson and have all the insight and knowledge that we need to move forward in that specific situation? Do you trust God with all your heart? Do we lean on our understanding, or do we lean on his understanding? What is God helping us with? What is God preparing us for? What goes into that preparation? What do we need to do to be prepared? What do we need to maybe experience in order to be prepared? Do we need to be moved? Do we need to be shaken? Maybe you're like me and you pray often to God to close all the doors except for the one that is for me, because my judgment can be kind of questionable. Where there's 2 doors here, God, that means there's 50% chance that I can go through the wrong one. So humbly, please just close them all except for one so that I don't have a choice. It's very obvious which decision is left for me to make. That's something that I pray often, because I'm infallible, because I'm a man, because I'll fail, I'll falter. But what does God have to do to shake me up, to move me, to spurn me into action? What does that action look like? Does that mean praying more? Does that mean seeking after him more? Does that mean putting all of my faith in him? Does that mean the physical world around me crumbles? I lose my job. I get sick. My friends and my family aren't doing well. My church isn't doing well. Then what? Then will I humble myself before the Lord? Then will I look up at the Lord and say, my life is yours, do what you want? If that's the cost, is it worth it? Do we trust God that much? Will we trust God when things aren't going well? When we're trying to do what we need to do, when we're trying to live good lives, when we're trying to conduct ourselves with Christ-like behavior, Christ-like thoughts, Christ-like actions, when we're doing everything that we could do, when we're praying to the God up above to guide us and lead us, and when things still aren't going well, when things still aren't playing out the way we thought that they would, will we trust in God? What does that look like? Will we trust in God? We're going to turn to the book of Genesis. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37. And we're going to start in verse 3. We're going to read a little bit about our friend Joseph. Genesis chapter 37, starting in verse 3. Jumping in. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Jumping down to verse 5. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaf stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and even the stars bowed down to me." So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So here we start reading about Joseph. It says that he was born to his father in old age, and that his father loved him. And his father loved him so much that he got him this beautiful tunic of many colors, and his older brothers would look over at him like, "Man, we don't like this little dude. We don't like Joseph at all. We don't like him." All right? And what's Joseph do? He starts having these dreams, knowing that maybe his brothers don't necessarily think the most of him. And what's he do? "Guys, listen to this dream I had. I've dreamt, and as I dreamed, you guys seemingly bow down to me." And they're looking at us, "Okay, that's real cute, Joseph." All right? And then he says, "I've had another dream. Not only were you guys bowing before me, but the sun, the moon, and the stars were all bowing before me." Probably not the best thing to share at that time for our friend Joseph. But that's what was going on in his life, and he shared it with his brothers. So we're going to skip a little further down into the story. We're going to jump down to verse 27. So Joseph gets sent out to tend to his brothers. His brothers see him approaching out the way, and they go, "Here comes our bratty little brother right now with his bright colored coat, making his way towards us." And they conspired to kill him. And that's what we'll pick up here. Verse 27. "Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. So we see here that instead of killing him, his brothers sold him into slavery in Egypt. Off to Egypt Joseph goes. Now we're going to jump a little further again, and we're going to go to chapter 39. Genesis chapter 39, starting in verse 1. "Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptians." Who was with Joseph? Let me read that again. Chapter 39, verse 2. "The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian." Who was with Joseph? Thank you. Thank you, help me out. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. Continuing on in in verse 3. "And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand." Who did his master see was with him? One more time. Who did his master see was with him? The Lord. The Lord was with him. Continuing on. "So Joseph found favor in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had, he put under his authority. So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of his house, and all that he had, the Lord blessed. He blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. So this overseer is entrusting Joseph with so much that he literally doesn't know what he has. He just knows, well, what I need, Joseph brings. Well, what all do you have? I don't know. Joseph's got it under control. Well, when I need food, there's food here. When I need wine, there's wine here. How much food, wine, etc., so forth, I have no idea. But that one there, at Joseph, the Lord is blessing him, and I'm entrusting him, and we are being blessed as a result of that. So great, great favor that we're seeing here. Continuing on in verse 7. And it came to pass after all these things that his master's wife cast long eyes on Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what it is with, Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wicked sin against God? So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her and lie with her. But it happened about this time, when Joseph went into the house to do his work, that none of the men of the house were inside. And she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand as he fled and ran outside. And so it was, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, see, he has brought in to us a Hebrew to mock us. He came to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him the words like these, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to mock me. So it happened as I lifted out my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So it was, when his master heard the words which his wife had spoken, saying, your servant did this to me after the manner, that his anger was aroused. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. Verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Pop quiz. Who was with Joseph? The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Who was with the Lord and who made things prosper? Who was with Joseph and who made things prosper? The Lord. Exactly, the Lord. Okay? So a little bit of a recap here, okay? Now, not once, but twice this has happened. Joseph catches a bit of a raw deal, catches a bit of a bad hand. We don't hear any murmuring. We don't hear any complaining. We don't hear him crying out to the Lord. Not to say that that didn't happen, but it is not written. Okay? But what we see is the people around Joseph saying, the Lord is with this one. And as a result of that, I am going to give authority over to you, and you do with it what you will, because the Lord is with you and the Lord will bless it. And we see and we read over and over and over again. This guy shows up, they give him the authority, things go well, and they go, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I'm not stupid either. I'm going to keep doing that. It seems to be working out pretty well. A little more information to recap. Some things that we have seen happen with Joseph thus far in this little reading that we've done. Number one, he was his dad's favorite, born to him in old age. Clearly this caused a little bit of friction between he and his brothers. He has these dreams, these wild dreams in which his brothers, the moon, the stars, they bow to him. We see that his brothers wanted to kill him and that they settled for selling him into slavery. Not so bad, we'll just sell him into slavery. We see that through all this, he rises in the house of the overseer, is falsely accused of trying to sin against the overseer and his wife, and is thrown into jail. Now we see that the same things are starting to happen again as he's in prison. They're giving him authority. The master of the prison has no concerns about what Joseph's doing. He just entrusts Joseph to do it. Now, we read and we see again that the Lord is with Joseph. How do you think these things would play out if Joseph was leaning on his own understanding? Your brothers betray you. They sell you into slavery. You try to be a good man. You try to live a godly life. You try to be a morally upstanding man who follows the commands of the Lord. And then you're falsely accused of rape. And then you're thrown into prison again. And again, we don't read of any murmuring. We don't hear of any frustration. Not saying that this wasn't happening, but again, that's not what was written. What we see is Joseph maintaining his trust in the Lord and acting appropriately. He doesn't turn his back on God. He doesn't say, look what my hands have brought me. No, he knows that it comes from the Lord. And clearly he's walking in faith. He's walking in trust of the Lord. Again, what would this look like if he is focusing on his understanding and not trusting in the Lord? There are so many things that we can experience, that we can go through that are difficult for us to understand and fathom. It doesn't necessarily make sense. Things happen that don't seem fair. Sometimes it seems that we are being purposely treated unfairly, or trials are purposely coming into our way. And that's part of the journey sometimes. But leaning on our understanding can only lead to more turmoil. We have to recognize that we need God's will to be done in our life. Not our will, but God's will. Matthew 6:10 says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Not our will, your will, the Father's will. Do we trust that the Lord wills for us much more than we could ever imagine? Do we really believe that? We can say it, but do we really believe it? Do we trust in the Lord with all our hearts? Do we lean on his understanding and not our own? Do we trust that the experience that we go through in the moment may be rough, may be difficult, may be painful, but that in the long run, the benefit will not just benefit us, but maybe others? Can we encourage others through that? Do we trust that all things will work out? One of my best friends in the world's name is Oscar. I've been best friends with Oscar since about 2 weeks into 6th grade. I talked a little too much in school, and Oscar was quiet, so I got put in the back of the classroom with quiet Oscar. In a couple days, quiet Oscar wasn't so quiet. We haven't looked back ever since. He's like a brother to me. True story. If Mr. Sims hadn't put me in the back of that class, I probably never would have spoken to him because he was quiet as a church mouse. He's like a brother to me. We've literally grown up together. Oscar served our country. He was in the Army. And I remember Oscar left for boot camp. And when he came back, I remember chatting with him, and he said he had gone to visit some cousins of his. And when he talked about these cousins, these weren't cousins that I had heard of. And I knew most of his family at this time. And he says, no, these are cousins on my dad's side. You've probably never heard of them. But, I was thinking about them when I was at basic. And when I came back, I thought it was important to go and spend some time with them. I said, cool, man, that sounds awesome. So Oscar went and spent time with his cousins. Shortly after that, one of his cousins passed away. And it was unexpected. And I remember him, as we talked about this, I remember him sharing with me how he was so appreciative of the fact that he had made it a point to go over and visit with his cousin, and that it had essentially opened up this entire side of his family that he hadn't spent time with since he was a child. So his cousin passes away, and he said, I really felt compelled to go over to the house. And so he went. And so he went over to the house. I remember talking to him about this, and he has a cousin named Ronald, okay? I remember he says this, you know, he sees his cousin Ronald, and they invite him in, and they catch up, and they reminisce, and they spend time together thinking about their cousin. And he and Ronald, it just continue on with this. They just continue on with this. He's always spending time with Ronald. He's spending time with Ronald. They're going on trips. They're hanging out. I come in town and visit, and we're all hanging out together. It's like Oscar had this other brother that I hadn't met before, but now who I had known. And some years later, Oscar's brother passed away. And I'll never forget the support that Ronald gave Oscar in that moment. I was here in Phoenix. I didn't have an opportunity to be there necessarily immediately the way that I wanted to be. And, you know, lots of friends and family who are being supportive. But again, this cousin of his, Ronald, like a brother to him, really, really there for him, really standing strong for him through this really difficult trial in his life. And even when Oscar got married, Ronald was his best man, you know? And I can't help but think back to talking to him on the phone when his cousin passed away. Talking to him and hearing the sadness in his voice and struggling to find the words, trying to be encouraging, trying to be uplifting, and just kind of wondering how things would play out. But through that, my best friend rekindled a relationship from childhood that was such a blessing to him, that continues to this very day to be such a blessing to him. There's so much fruit that has blossomed out of that relationship. You know, to this day, Ronald reaches out to me. He's a good friend of mine now, and he's a therapist too. So I can talk to Ronald about things that I can't talk to other people about because he understands things the way a therapist does. And for me, it's been such a blessing to have him encourage me and uplift me and talk to me about things. And that is just a small piece of that puzzle. For Oscar, he's been an even bigger blessing. For Oscar's wife, for Oscar's friends, for Oscar's family, just so much has happened out of this relationship that was rekindled, that was rooted in this tragedy, that was rooted in the death of someone. Not 2D, not 3D, not 4D, God-D, all the angles, all the perspectives. We don't know what God has planned for us. We don't know why God makes us experience some of the things that we do, but we experience them. We go through them. Whose understanding are we leaning on? Do we lean on our understanding, or do we humble ourselves and lean on the understanding of the Lord? How do we work through this? How do we figure it out? Where are our opportunities? Where are our lessons? Why are they lessons? Will it be evident tomorrow, next week, next year, 10 years from now in the kingdom? We don't know. But we know whose understanding that we need to be leaning on. Let's come back to Joseph. So Joseph's now been imprisoned. He's been falsely accused of trying to lay with his master's wife. He's in prison. The prison overseer sees that the Lord is with him. The prison overseer starts to give Joseph authority and just let him run with it. So we're going to pick this up in chapter 40. We're going to pick this up in chapter 40. Let's start in verse 5. It's a little bit of context. So Joseph's still in prison. Pharaoh's now sent a butler and a baker to prison, okay? So Joseph comes across this baker and this butler in prison. So again, chapter 40, starting in verse 5. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream, both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with his own interpretation. And Joseph came to them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his Lord's house, saying, Why do you look so sad? And they said to him, we each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. So Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please. We're going to skip down here to verse 20. All right, so before I do that, the butler and the baker share their dreams with Joseph. Joseph interprets the dreams, okay? Joseph tells the baker, not so good news for you, my friend. You dreamed of 3 branches. These 3 branches represent 3 days. In 3 days, that's it. You're going to be done. Pharaoh's putting you to death. He gives another interpretation to the butler whose dream was similar. He says, your 3 also represent 3 days. But in 3 days, Pharaoh will come and restore you to your position. Okay? Okay. Verse 20. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all the servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker amongst his servants. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Verse 23. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. One small detail that I skipped over is upon completion of interpretation of the dreams, Joseph says to the butler and to the baker, please, please, don't forget me. Don't forget that I interpreted these dreams. Please tell Pharaoh it was me who interpreted these dreams, that I can get out of this house. I've been falsely accused. I'm a good man. Please don't forgive me. Please tell Pharaoh. Okay, Joseph, we'll tell him. Don't worry about it. Thanks for interpreting the dream. And then we see in verse 23, yet the chief butler, now being restored to his position, just as Joseph told him he would be, did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Chapter 41, starting in verse 1. Then it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he stood by the river. Time out. So now it's been 2 years. 2 years of forgetting the man who interpreted these dreams. We don't hear anything again about any murmuring or frustration or turning from the Lord. It could have happened, but it's not written. Okay, so Joseph is going on. He's still being entrusted by the prison overseer. He is continuing to be a man of the Lord. And we see here in the beginning of chapter 41 that Pharaoh's had a dream, and he is, trying to get this figured out. Jumping down to verse 14. Let me start in verse 9 briefly. Then the chief butler spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I remember my faults this day. When Pharaoh was angry with the servants and put me in custody of the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker, we each had a dream in one night. He and I, each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. Okay, so he remembers. And he shares with Pharaoh, hey, wait a minute. I think I might know somebody who can help you. A couple years ago, remember you got mad at me, threw me in prison? Yeah, I had a dream too. While I was in jail, I had this dream. Guess what? This guy down there, he interpreted it for me. Maybe we should see if we can find this guy. Verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon, and he shaved, changed his clothing, and came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it. So Joseph answered Pharaoh, and I love this. May this be an example to all of us to stay humble and give praise, honor, and glory to God. Okay? It says here, so Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Get every opportunity to say, yes, yes, yes. Thank you for getting me out of prison. It is I am Joseph, interpreter of dreams. And he says, no. It is God who will give you peace. Not me, but God. I love that. So I'm going to summarize here. He interprets the dreams. He tells Pharaoh there's going to be 7 years of miraculous blessing and fruit in the land, and that it will be followed by 7 years of famine. exhorts Pharaoh, you have to prepare for this. You have to put people in positions to prepare. It's going to be an awful famine. You have to get ready. Okay? We're going to jump down to verse 37 here. Okay? Because as this happens, Pharaoh listens and says, great interpretation. This was fantastic. Thank you for the information. Not only are we going to do this, but I'm going to have you do this. You will lead this up for me. So again, picking up in verse 37. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this man can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and as wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. And he clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried out before him, bow the knee. So he set over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. So again, we see this thing happening again, okay, where people are recognizing that the Lord is with Joseph and he's being blessed according to that. He interprets the dreams. He helps Egypt prepare for this famine. Pharaoh gives him rings, gives him a chariot, gives him a new name, gives him wives, blesses him with riches, with as much as he can find. And just as he said it would happen, it happened. Many, many years of blessings. They prepared, they stored food, they prepared for the famine, and boom, the famine came. And when the famine came, the famine was dire. And I'm going to kind of summarize the rest of this here. Eventually, Joseph's brothers make their way to the land. They're in need of food, as everybody else in the region is. They don't recognize that this is their brother Joseph before them. Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. They reconcile. They send for his younger brother. They send for his father. And they're all one happy family being blessed because God so chose to bless Joseph. Now, think back to how this all started. The favorite of his father, bore to him in old age. Think about the dreams that he had. Think about the interpretations of the dreams that he shared with his brothers, all of which came to pass. His brothers want to kill him. They settle on selling him into slavery. He rises in the house of the overseer. All this time as a man of the Lord. He's falsely accused of trying to lay with his master's wife. He's sent to prison. Now the prison guard sees him. He sees that the Lord is with him. And again, he starts to rise, and people start to recognize, the Lord is with him. He has an opportunity to interpret some dreams. He interprets these dreams. Surely this is his ticket out. He says, hey, man, don't forget me. Please don't forget me. Tell Pharaoh, tell Pharaoh. Okay, sure thing, Joseph, yes. 2 whole years pass. 2 whole years pass. But then he remembered. And he remembered at the most opportune moment. Pharaoh sends for him. Pharaoh's having these dreams. Joseph interprets the dreams. Pharaoh says, magnificent. Here's a ring. Here's a chariot. Do as you say. Oversee the land. He's blessed accordingly. So, again, coming back to what we started talking about initially. Trusting in the Lord with all our heart. Leaning on his understanding and not ours. How could this story have played out differently? What if Joseph grew frustrated? Maybe Joseph did. Maybe Joseph cried out to God, as many of us have, I'm sure, and said, Father, why is this happening? Help me understand this. Why are you putting me through this? What have I done to deserve this? Father, I'm trying. I'm trying to do right by you. I'm trying to follow your commandments. I'm trying to love my neighbor as I love myself. Bad card, bad card, bad card, bad card, bad card. Help me understand, Father, why? If the Lord said he was going to deal you a bad hand for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years, but that because of those bad hands that you got dealt for 20 or 30 years, that an entire nation would survive, would prosper, would be blessed. What about one city? What about one family? What about one person? Do we trust him? Do we trust God if he says, you may not understand in this very moment, but you will understand when it's time for you to understand? In the meantime, will you trust in God? Will you trust God through the growing pains? Will you trust God through trying to make changes in your life? Will you have faith that God will provide, that God will open doors? That even if we deal with a difficulty, that even if we deal with a trial, that even if we're dealing with sickness, that if we pray that the Lord's will be done in heaven as it is on earth, that we will be okay. Where's our faith? Do we trust in him? Did God ever leave Joseph's side? No, clearly not. God did not leave Joseph's side. God was with Joseph. When his brothers conspired to kill him, when his brothers sold him into slavery, when he was falsely accused, when he was imprisoned, okay? And also when his hands were blessed. And also when dreams needed to be interpreted. And also when a great famine struck the land. What are the things that we have gone through and experienced? What are the tough lessons that we have learned? Where are our opportunities to encourage others, to build others up? If we went through the room and everybody told a story of something that was difficult, unfair, tough on them, everybody would have a story to tell. I bet you if we follow that up and said, how has this changed you? Has this benefited you? Is there a silver lining in this story? And again, everybody could share one. I've experienced some real difficulties in my life. I've dealt with some challenges. And I have cried out to the Lord, and I've asked him why. I've asked the Lord to help me understand. Some things I feel like I understand now. Some things I don't. But every day I try and trust in the Lord with all my heart. Whether with work trials, whether with illness, self-doubt, anxiety, fear, trust in the Lord with all your heart. If God says, I'm going to shake your world up and I'm going to do something to you that puts you on your knees every day, that makes you pray to me every day, and at the end of that trial, at the end of that difficulty, you and God are like this, then bring on the trial. Then bring it on. Then bring on the sickness. Then bring on whatever it is that I need to do to serve you, Lord, to serve you the way you need me to serve you, to prepare me for whatever it is that you have in store for me, to open up my eyes and my heart to you, to see, to recognize, to say, I get it now. I understand now. He's with us. He's preparing us. Sometimes it's very obvious what he's preparing us for when it happens. Sometimes we walk around saying, I have all these difficult things that I've gone through, that I've experienced, and I don't know how I'm going to impart encouragement or wisdom on anybody else. But I can assure you that God does it for a reason. But we have to trust in him. In all things. In all things. And that's scary. But sometimes that's what God needs to do with us to get us in the position where we need to be. Now I have you where I need you. Now I can work with you. Now that all this chaos around you is forcing you to focus on me, now we can do some work. Now I can show you who I am. Like I said, whatever your ailment is, whatever your difficulty is, whatever your trial is, if your heart is breaking, if you're going to sleep with tears in your eyes, if you're going to sleep anxious, whatever it is, put your trust in God. Put your trust in God. If God decides to do something, nothing can stop it. Nothing. Nothing can stop it. If God says everybody in here is going to fly right now, then you know what? We're flying. That's just how it's going to be. So have no fears and have no doubts around God's plan for you. Because if God has a plan for you, then God has a plan for you. Nothing's going to stop it. All we have to do is walk in it. I'm going to conclude in the book of Romans. We're going to conclude in the book of Romans. Romans chapter 8. Starting in verse 28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Trust in God, friends. Be encouraged because God is with us. If there's a difficulty that you're dealing with, if you're dealing with a trial, if you're struggling, if there's anything at all that you want to pray about, I would be so humbled and honored to pray with you. Let's do that. But I encourage you all, please, 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 trust in the Lord with all your hearts. Happy Sabbath.